The House on the Cliff. Chapter 24. The Roundup. The Hardy Boys in the meantime were in the thick of the struggle. Frank fought desperately with the smugglers he had assailed in the living room of the house, while Joe raced across the yard towards the trap door leading to the underground caves. He found that although 3 of the smugglers had been captured by officers in the yard, and that as many more were fighting to escape, none of the police had as yet learned of the trapdoor down which some of the men had disappeared. With a shout to a nearby officer who had just succeeded in clapping the handcuffs on one of the smugglers, Joe made his way down the stairs. He heard the officer running over to the edge of the trap and saw the gleam of the flashlight. "Some of them got out this way," Joe shouted back to the officer. The man called to one of his companions, and then footsteps clattered on the stairs as Joe went on. He reached the door that opened into the chamber where his father had been a prisoner. But on entering the room, he found it empty. There were evidences of hasty flight. The door on the far side of the room was wide open. "Secret passages, exclaimed one of the officers as he came into the room. He was a state trooper in uniform. Joe led the way out through the opposite door and down the stairs that led towards the bottom of the cliff. The trooper who had spoken illuminated the way with his flashlight, and they clattered on down the stairs until they reached the storage room. Here everything was in confusion. The escaping smugglers had evidently endeavored to take with them what goods they could. Probably the smaller packages containing drugs for boxes and parcels were overturned and strewn about the floor. "You seem to know this place pretty well," said one of the troopers, as Joe led the way across the opposite door and stepped out onto the landing. "I've been here before, got in this way," he answered. "There's a water cave below this passage. They've probably made their getaway in the boat." They hastened down the passageway and came at last to the cave. As Joe expected, the boat was gone. "They got away," he said in disappointment as the trooper turned the flashlight on to the channel between the rocks. There was a shout from the darkness of the cave. Joe gave a shout of joy. It was Tony Prideaux's voice. Then Joe and the troopers with him heard the steady beat of a motorboat. Joe seized the flashlight and ran out along the path leading to the entrance of the cave. The motorboat was not many yards away. Tony had been searching for the channel. "Right this way," Joe called out. "Head towards the right of the cave, and you'll be in deep water. A little further. Good." As the motorboat drew nearer, he saw that it was filled with men and that a rowboat was being towed behind. "We got 'em!" cried Tony exultantly. "They were just getting out of the cove in the boat when we came up." "Who is with you?" asked Joe. "Police. The rest of them went up the shore road in a car." "We've caught the whole gang of them. They raided the house and got the rest of the smugglers. We thought these fellows had made a getaway. No chance. Although it was mighty close, they pretty nearly slipped out of the cove right under our noses." The boat came to a stop beside the natural wharf of the rock. 1 or 2 of the officers, revolvers in hand, climbed out. 3 of the smugglers had been captured while trying to escape from the cove in the rowboat. "If they'd got out, we would never have caught them," said Joe. "They were headed out towards a ship." "A ship!" exclaimed one of the officers, a burly man in plain clothing. He stepped forward. "Did they say anything about a ship?" "A man named Lai Chang has a ship laying in wait outside the bay," said Joe. "I heard them talking about it." "Good!" exclaimed the burly man. "Now we've captured the whole outfit." He returned to Tony. "I suppose your boat is good for another little run." "I'll say it is, sir." "I want as many officers as we can spare," said the burly man. "We'll get out and find that ship. Lai Chang, did you say?" he added, turning to Joe. That's the name. I know his ship. We've been trying to catch that villain for years. Go on up and see how the rest of the men made out at the house on the cliff, and take as many officers as they can spare. There's a passage up through the rocks, I take it." "Regular staircase all the way, sir," remarked Darst, one of the raiding officers. "Good. Don't lose any time." The 3 smugglers were taken out of the boat and handcuffed, then escorted up the stairs, while the burly man, who was the chief of a squad of federal agents undertaking a drive against the smugglers on the part of the coast, remained with the motorboat. Within a short time Darst returned with 3 more officers. He repeated that a clean sweep had been made at the house. "They have 'em all handcuffed and sittin' in the kitchen," he said. "Mr. Hardy got Snakely." "Snakely!" exclaimed the federal man. "Is it his gang?" "Yes, sir. He got Snakely in the cellar. One of his sons tackled Redhead Blunt, one of Snakely's sidekicks, and held him down until the police came. When we brought our 3 in, that finished the roundup. It does so far. We're going out and grab Lai Chang from the ship, and that'll clean everything up." The officers got into the motorboat, and Joe climbed in beside Tony Prideaux, who was at the wheel. The craft backed out on the channel into deeper water of the cave, then sped out into Barmont Bay. "Once we get out of the bay, we should see her lights," said the federal officer. "Lai Chang probably has his ship anchored just off the coast." This proved to be the case. The lights of the vessel were soon descried, and the motorboat sped toward it through the night. When the boat drew alongside, the federal man roared out, "Ahoy there!" A voice answered in Chinese. "Speak English," roared the officer. "Throw over a ladder, or we'll open fire on you." "Who 3? "The police." Jabbering voices and running footsteps suddenly created a commotion. One of the troopers fired his revolver into the air very promptly. A ladder was lowered over the side of the vessel. "That's better," said the federal officer, as he climbed up over the rail, revolver in hand. "I'll just talk to your skipper for a minute." The capture of Lai Chang was without incident. When he was told that Snakely and the gang were captured, the man, who was a small, wizened little fellow with villainous countenance, blandly submitted to arrest and consented to be taken ashore. There were only 2 or 3 members of the crew aboard, and the others having shore leave, so 2 of the federal men were left in charge of the ship until relief could be sent from Bayport, and the motorboat made its way back to the cove. The roundup was complete. Snakely's smuggling gang had been completely broken up. Chapter 25. The Mystery Explained. The Hardy boys were the heroes of Bayport. When the news of the capture of Snakely and his men spread throughout the city next day, as for Tony Prideaux, he was the envy of all the chums of the 2 lads. "Tony had all the luck," bemoaned Chet Morton, as the boys were all sitting in the barn back of the Hardys' home next afternoon. This barn, which had been fitted up as a gymnasium, was a meeting place for the lads on occasion of importance. "We had to have a motorboat," said Frank. "Believe me, I was wishing more than once that the whole crowd was along." "And you'll get the reward for capturing Snakely?" asked Phil Cohen. "Not all of it. Dad gets half. Joe and I split the rest." "You haven't any kick coming. What's going to happen to Snakely?" "He'll probably go to the electric chair," answered Frank soberly. "Why? He murdered Felix Palooka, the miser." "Murdered him?" "Yes. Dad found out in his investigation. Dad suspected all along that there was some connection between Snakely and the house on the cliff, especially when he found that Snakely and Palooka had been related. He went out to find out what he could, but the smugglers saw him and captured him." What about that fellow they had imprisoned in the cellar? Questioned Biff Hooper. Didn't you say Snakely was just going to kill him when your father saved his life? That was the young fellow we saved in the bay that day. The young chap who told us his name was Jones. It wasn't his real name at all. His name is Yates, and he was one of the smugglers. Why was Snakely chasing him that day? Asked Perry. It seems that Yates got angry because he didn't get his full share of the money from the last smuggling trip, so he threatened to tell the police on Snakely. The smugglers locked him up, but he got away in one of the motorboats, so they chased him and ran him down. They thought they would kill him in the explosion or else drown him, but Joe and I managed to bring him ashore. We left him at the Kane farmhouse, but the smugglers came along the next day and kidnapped him. They kept him prisoner in the cellar of the Palooka place after that. I still can't understand about those yells and shrieks we heard the first day we were out at the farmhouse. That was just to frighten us away. One of the men of the gang did it, and they had him posted there to frighten people off by yelling and shrieking whenever anyone showed up around the place. He was the chap who stole our tools from the motorcycles, explained Frank. But after our visit there, added Joe, they thought it was too dangerous and that there might be an investigation, so they put Redhead and his wife on one of the men there to pose as renters of the place. So there weren't any ghosts after all, exclaimed Jerry Gilroy. Nary a ghost, laughed Frank. Snakely explained everything this morning in a confession. The whole gang is locked up, even to Lai Chang. Yates, the young fellow they had kept a prisoner so long, told the whole story first. He turned state's evidence and told how long the smugglers had been going on, how Snakely had made use of the house on the cliff after killing Palooka, how he fixed up the tunnels in the cliff. He told everything. It seems that Palooka had the smuggling idea in the first place, and he spent years fixing up those caves and tunnels. Then everything was ready. He called Snakely, and Snakely didn't like to share with anyone who had a right to a voice in the affair, so he killed the old man and took his money and brought the smuggling gang in there. Yates told all that? He told so much of it that Snakely saw there was no use bluffing any longer, so he admitted the whole story. Gosh, sighed Chet, just my luck. I was there in time to get scared to death by that guy, and there in time to get bawled out and chased off the farm by Redhead and his wife, but I missed out on all the fun at the last. Not much fun about it, declared Joe. It seems funny to us that the smugglers caught us in the cave just as we were getting Dad free. And it wasn't any fun hiding in the attic with the bullets coming through the floor, 19 to the dozen, added Frank. I thought every minute was going to be my last. No, I guess it wasn't any too fun, admitted Chet. You deserve every cent you get of that reward. We'll treat the whole gang to feed as soon as we collect, Joe promised. Awesome, shouted Chet, turning a handspring. Now you're talking. The Hardy Boys kept their word. Soon after they had received their share of the reward, which was presented to them with many glowing words and congratulations from the federal authorities, who had long been trying to put a stop to Snakely and put him behind bars, they gave a dinner in the barn that eclipsed any similar feed in the history of Bayport. I hope the Hardy Boys solve a mystery every week, said Chet, as he confronted his third dish of ice cream. And I hope they celebrate every success the same way. The Hardy Boys were not destined to solve a mystery every week, but it was not long before they were plunged into a maze of events, which were fully as exciting as those which led to the finding of the tower treasure and those that followed their first visit to the house on the cliff. The story of their adventure will be told in the next volume of this series, called The Hardy Boys, The Secret of the Old Mill. Tony Prideaux, conscious of the envying glances of the other boys, because he had participated in the eventful climax to the mystery of the house on the cliff, scooped up the last of his ice cream and said, "Once I wanted my father to buy an automobile, and he bought a motorboat instead. Now he wants to sell the boat and buy an automobile. Just let him try it. That boat gave me more fun in one day than I've had since we came to the States." The end. I hope you enjoyed this book. This is the second book in the Hardy Boys series, and we have one more that we can read this year because it's in the public domain, so we'll have to look at that soon. The next book we're going to read is just going to be a short book, I think probably religious. So join me next for that on Miss Retro Reads, and thanks for listening.